He buried something deep in the woods that night. Not gold, not secrets, but his own blood. Richard Hale, one of Boston's richest men, powerful, proud, and heartless. The world saw him as a king, but no one knew the sin he tried to hide beneath the earth. They say karma never misses an address. And for Richard, it came knocking on a stormy night years later, when the same child he had once rejected returned. Not to destroy him, but to save him. If it's a boy, he once told his wife, raise him like a king. But if it's a girl, bury her. That was the night Richard sealed his own fate. Because what he tried to bury wasn't a curse. It was a blessing in disguise. And when life stripped away his wealth, his pride, and his strength, that same blessing came back. Not for revenge, but for love. This is the story of a father who hated his daughter, until she became the only light left in his darkness. This is a father's light. Many years ago, in the old neighborhoods outside Boston, there lived a man named Richard Hale. He owned a thriving textile company that supplied premium fabrics to boutiques from New York to Los Angeles. The business had been his father's, then became his bigger, richer, louder with success. His Georgian-style mansion sat on a rise beyond a wrought-iron gate, a line of elms shadowing the driveway like sentries guarding a secret. Inside, marble floors, walls hung with oil paintings, a grand staircase that climbed in a perfect curve toward rooms few people entered. Richard's talent was ruthless focus. He believed in control, in legacy, in the family name etched on office brass and boardroom glass. But the belief that ruled him most lived like a dark knot in his chest. He despised daughters. He'd grown up with a father who drilled it in. Night after night, across mahogany tables and crystal glasses, a son carries the line. A daughter dilutes it. Richard repeated that sentence so often to himself it hardened into law. His wife, Grace, was the opposite. Tender, steady, a quiet soul with a patient smile that lingered in the kitchen long after the housemaids had gone. She kept a well-worn Bible near the window where the morning light fell. She understood her husband's storms and walked softly around them, not from weakness, but from hope, the kind that believes even stone can warm in the sun. Then, one soft spring, Grace became pregnant. Joy lifted the house like birdsong. But when she told Richard, his eyes shone only briefly before cooling into steel. "I'm leaving for California," he said, straightening a cufflink. "New accounts. Could be months." He paused at the threshold. The front door opened to the purr of a waiting town car. "If it's a boy, raise him like a king," he said. "If it's a girl, end it before it starts." The door shut. The house trembled. Grace sat on the edge of their bed, one hand over her heart and one over the tiny fluttering life inside her, and cried until the light on the wall turned from gold to gray. The days slowed. Richard flew west, chasing contracts and applause. Grace stayed home with her hands folded under lamplight, whispering the same prayer over and over. "God, let it be a boy, not for me, but for his mercy." But heaven answers with truth, not with fear. On a winter morning, as snow sifted like feathers across the lawn, Grace gave birth to a daughter, a small miracle with rose-petal lips and a cry so bright it lit the ceiling. Grace pressed the child to her chest and felt something bigger than fear wash through her. "You're here," she whispered, tears warm on her cheeks. "You're my light." Then Richard's command rose like a cold wind. "End it before it starts." No mother's heart could carry such a command. Grace kissed the baby's forehead and made a vow that would cost her everything if it had to. The child would live. She would raise her with tenderness, teach her love instead of bitterness, and make sure the first word that soft mouth learned was daddy. 2 months later, a courier dropped a letter at the mansion. Richard was coming home. The staff polished silver and aired rooms. Grace felt dread gather like thunder. She dressed the baby in simple white and waited in the foyer where the chandelier trembled when the front door opened. Richard strode in, with dry California sun still on his coat and gift bags dangling from both hands, tiny blue blankets, a toy baseball glove, a silver rattle engraved R.H. Jr. "Bring me my son," he called. Grace stepped forward. The baby peeked around her shoulder and squealed, reaching, her small hands opening and closing. Dada, she babbled, a music of innocence that would have made any man smile. Richard's face drained. The bag slid from his hands. The silver rattle clattered on marble like a clock stopping. He stared at the child as if she were a verdict. "I told you what to do," he said, voice flat and low. "You defied me." Grace moved to shield the baby, but Richard's anger burned past her. He took the child in his arms, not gently, and walked out, down the steps, across the iced lawn, toward the woods that bordered the property. Grace followed, stumbling, pleading, her voice thin in the cold. "Richard, please, please don't, she's your daughter." The wood swallowed them. The snow fell harder. In a clearing where summer boys sometimes built forts, Richard knelt and clawed at the earth, breaking the frozen skin with a shovel left by landscapers. The baby, warm inside a white knit blanket, cooed at the gray sky, unaware. And then, from the trees, a voice called out, "Hey, what on earth are you doing?" A man stepped into the clearing, an old veteran from down the road, the one who tended flags at the cemetery on Memorial Day. His coat was patched, his cheeks red with wind. He saw the hole, the bundle, the father's wild eyes, and something in his bones remembered the sound of wrong. "You stop that," he said, voice iron. "You don't get to do this. Not on my watch." The words hit like a bell. Richard's hands shook. For one sliver of a second, the spell of his father's teachings cracked. He scooped up the child and stalked back toward the house. The veteran watched him go, lips taut with a prayer meant for strangers and fools. Grace met them at the edge of the lawn, collapse and relief in one sob. She took the baby back, kissed her, and whispered thanks into the soft place behind a tiny ear. Richard said nothing. He had not buried his daughter, but he had not changed. Years folded like linens. The baby grew into a little girl, sweet, careful, a helper in the kitchen and a shadow in the hallways. Grace taught her gentleness and the alphabet on sticky notes along the window frame. She taught her to pray for people who didn't know how to love. The girl's first clear word remained "Daddy." She said it every time Richard entered a room. He answered with a glance, as cold as the silver picture frames on the mantel. Then, illness came to Grace, quiet at first, then relentless. Richard, busy with expansion plans and board meetings, offered little more than a frown and a phone call. On a pale afternoon, with snow clouds rolling in, Grace called her daughter close. "Listen to me, honey," she whispered, stroking the girl's hair. "You take care of your dad. Don't let his anger make you angry. Forgive faster than you hurt. Promise me." "I promise," the girl said, not understanding why promises tasted like salt. That night, Grace's breathing thinned like silk, pulled too tight, and then stopped. The house fell hushed. A row of casseroles arrived and cooled on the counter, and the girl learned how quiet can be a kind of noise. Richard remarried within months, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. 2 sons were born in quick order, loud and golden, nannies at their heels. The daughter became invisible, the shadow that turned lights off, the hands that gathered scattered Legos, the quiet that fed the dog and folded the towels. No one asked about her homework or measured the hem on her only dress. Wealth lived everywhere in that house, except around her shoulders. Time does what truth tells it to. It waited, then moved. Richard's second wife loved Richard's money more than his life. She learned account numbers by heart and how to tilt a story in rooms full of lawyers. The sons learned quickly which signatures opened which safes and which smiles opened which doors. When the market turned and Richard's health turned with it, a creeping degenerative skin disease that left scars he couldn't hide, he slowed. Deals slipped through his fingers. He coughed in the night. He missed board meetings. His name shrank on invitations. One evening, as rain needled the windows, the 3 of them stood in the study, wife at the desk, sons shoulder to shoulder, in new suits that hadn't seen a day of honest sweat. Papers lay in a neat stack. "It's time to transfer control," the older son said, rehearsed. "To protect the company," the younger echoed. "We're doing what's best," the wife said, sliding a pen across the desk like a judge handing down the only sentence she could bear to say out loud. Richard signed. The company, his father's legacy, and his entire ambition moved across the desk and into their hands. Within a month, the locks on the mansion changed. Within a week, the staff stopped showing up because there was no one willing to pay them. By Friday, Richard and his daughter, the only person who made him tea without being asked, stood on the front steps with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. The daughter wrapped her father's coat tighter around him. "Come on," she said. "I know a place." She took him not to a fine hotel or a friend's guest house, but to the tree line at the far end of the old property, to the very clearing where winter once bit his fingers and an old veteran had spoken like thunder. There, in a weathered hunting cabin owned by a kind neighbor who remembered Grace, they found 4 walls that kept out wind and a wood stove that turned the cold into comfort if you fed it often enough. The daughter fed it often enough. Days fell into a rhythm made of care. The daughter rose early, placed the kettle on the stove, and checked her father's bandages. She learned how to clean wounds and how to hide her own. She found work at a nearby diner where the coffee came thick and hot and regulars tipped in 5s and stories. She brought home soup in mason jars, fresh bread, and small surprises, a wool cap with a mismatched palm, a paperback with a fold on the page where the good man changes. Richard sat by the window and watched his breath fog the glass. The woods he once used to hide a crime he never committed now hid a truth he could no longer outrun. He had loved wrongly. The girl he'd refused had become the only person in the world who refused to refuse him back. One night, the daughter came home late, hair damp from sleet, a paper bag grease-spotted with dinner. She set the food down and knelt in front of her father. "Dad," she said softly. And the word dad, not Richard, chose to forgive him before he had asked. "We should straighten out the legal stuff. The house, the shares, Mom's things. The boys took everything, but you're still you. Some of it is still yours. Some of it should have always been ours." Richard swallowed against the gravel in his throat. He thought of judges and suits and lies stacked on lies. He thought of Grace, of snow, of a veteran's command in the trees. He nodded. They went to court. The daughter sat upright on the hard bench while the sons dodged truth, and the second wife wore a dress that looked like money. Their lawyer argued with a polished jaw. Her lawyer argued with a polished laugh. But the facts are stubborn. Transfers made under duress, elder abuse. A trail of siphoned assets as obvious as footprints in fresh snow. The judge, a woman who had worked too hard for any man, a sloppy legacy, ruled to restore a share to Richard and to recognize the daughter as rightful interest, especially in the old house where she had lived a lifetime in the space between love and nothing. The sons were forced to vacate. The wife left with what she could carry and the rest she couldn't, which was her pride. Richard didn't gloat. He simply walked through the front door with his daughter at his side and stood very still in the quiet foyer, listening to the house remember them. He did not grow young again. The disease did not reverse. Wealth did not return like a faithful dog. But something better moved in. Something Grace had prayed for in a window with morning light. Richard sat with his daughter at the kitchen table. She had wiped clean with a damp cloth and confession. He took her hands. They were work-worn now, nicked by diner knives and chapped by winter. "I tried to bury you," he said, and the words shook like old floorboards. "I tried to bury you in the ground and in my heart. Your mother asked you to forgive me. You did it before I deserved it. I am sorry. For every day I made you feel like less than a miracle." The daughter pressed his hands between hers. "You're my dad," she said simply. And in that sentence lived 1,000 small mercies, the kind that built a bridge where there was only river. Richard began to live small and true. He learned to say good morning first. He learned how to slice an apple without waste. He learned to leave the good chair for her when she got home late. On Sundays, they drove to the cemetery with a coffee for him and a flower for Grace. He cried there the first time, a quiet, private spill. The second time he cried harder. The third time, he talked to Grace out loud and left nothing out. In spring, the daughter met a man named Evan who delivered produce to the diner and believed gentleness was a form of strength. He learned her story slowly, the way you learn a coastline, by walking it. They married in a small church with big windows. Richard, fragile in a navy suit that hung loose at the shoulders, walked her down the aisle like a man carrying light and setting it where it belonged. They did not move away. Evan carried his bag into the Hale house the way a decent man carries his vows, not as a weight, but as a promise. Laughter returned to rooms where silence had kept scorecards. The daughter filled the pantry with jars, labeled in her careful hand. Richard told Evan how to mend the banister at the turn of the stairs. Evan taught Richard the names of birds landed on the elm. When summer rolled in, the three of them brought a picnic to the clearing. The veteran who'd once intervened had long since moved to a warm state with his daughter. But the place remembered. Richard stood there with a paper cup of lemonade and looked at the ground he had once tried to make a grave. The air was green, the kind of green that makes you think anything can grow where someone chooses to love. "Thank you," he said into the trees. To the old man, to Grace, to the stubborn mercy of time, to the God he had cursed by living like one. He turned to his daughter. The light caught her hair the way it had when she was small, and said "Dada" at the foot of the stairs. "Do you know," he said, smiling at the ache of it, "I used to believe sons were the legacy. Turns out my legacy is standing right in front of me." She laughed, and the sound braided itself through the branches overhead. Late that year, in a sunroom cleaned of dust and bad memory, Richard closed his eyes. The daughter sat with him, her palm on the back of his hand, counting breaths with a patience learned in kitchens and winter cabins. He went quietly, not into dark, but into something like morning. They buried him near Grace. The marker was simple, the dates neat, the words beneath his name chosen by the daughter, who had forgiven him long before the world would have demanded it. Richard Hale, beloved father at last. Love turned the light on. The house did not feel empty after that. It felt settled. Evan fixed what time had loosened. The daughter opened the windows and let the breeze choose its rooms. In the evenings, she sat on the front steps where the elm shadows striped the lawn and watched the sky move from blue to violet to a kind of soft gold that Grace would have called a blessing. And when neighbors asked her what the story of her life had taught her, she said this: "Don't measure children by the shape of your pride. Measure yourself by the shape of your love. Because daughters aren't a burden. They're light. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they read the only light left when all the wrong you've done finally turns the night honest."